Hi everyone, it's Ardith, and today I'm using some new stamps and dies from the latest Essentials by Ellen release, along with an older set to create a super birthday card. I started by stamping the Hero Lady by Brandy Kincaid onto a panel of white cardstock, using my brand new Gina K Amalgam ink. This ink is designed to work with both alcohol markers and watercolor, so I was excited to give it a try, and it didn't disappoint. I stamped the lady a bit off the side of the panel so that I would be able to create a scene of her looking over the city. I cut her out with the coordinating die and my Gemini Junior, and then I used some washi tape to tape down the new Big City die across the remainder of the panel to create a skyline before running that through my Gemini Junior as well. This gave me a three-part panel: the lady, the buildings, and the sky. To color the buildings, I used blackjack ink from Catherine Pooler and a life-changing blender brush. This ink is a dark gray and the perfect shade for my nighttime buildings. Next, I used suede shoes ink to darken the night sky. I added some richness to it with one of the new Urban Oasis colors, Queen for a Day. This is a deep purple that really adds interest. I didn't really go for a totally smooth blend, partly because these inks really smooth out as they dry, and partly because I think that any remaining unevenness would just add interest to the sky, which is never just one color. I flipped over the panel and used small pieces of washi tape to hold the three portions together while I trimmed it down with a rectangle die. I could have just started with the rectangle die, and that would have saved me this step. Next, I colored the Hero Lady with Copic markers. I've sped it up quite a lot and I kept it all in, but you can skip ahead if you want. I used 3 shades for her hair and her cape to try and create some dimension and interest, but pretty much everything else was just 2 shades. I had also planned to keep her top white, but the red from the cape bled in a little bit on one side, so I ended up with a darker color. There are lots of ways that you could have gotten a similar look making this card. I could have done the whole panel as a cityscape and then stamped the lady on another panel, cut her out and popped her out. But once I had the picture of this card in my mind, this is the way my brain went. But there's always plenty of options for creating similar looks in different ways. Next, I felt like my city needed more buildings. There was a big solid gray area that just wasn't very interesting, so I taped down a different portion of the skyline die and I cut it out. You can see that the die cut a bit of a halo around the Hero Lady, so I found matching Copic markers so that I could color the white edges and help her blend into the scene a bit more. I started with her still in the panel, but I found it easier not to have to worry about coloring over the ink-blended portions of the panel once I removed her. I did make a note of where the gray started before I separated her from the panel. To create my sentiment, I started by cutting the smallest speech bubble from the new Speech Bubble die set from white cardstock. There was no room for a magnet, so I used repositionable adhesive to stick the bubble to the mouse pad in my MISTI so that it wouldn't move. The new Good Times stamp set has the almost perfect sentiment for this card: have a super duper birthday. I didn't have room for the duper on my speech bubble, so I altered it. Usually I would get my scissors out and perform some stamp surgery, but I thought I would give masking a go this time. I put the stamp down over the speech bubble so that have a super was centered, and then I picked it up with the MISTI door. I used some purple tape to mask the duper birthday portion of the stamp. Sorry about my head there, but those words were close together, so I needed to be sure that the mask was in exactly the right place. I inked up the have a super portion, removed the tape, and then closed the door and stamped it down. So far, so good. I cleaned the stamp, but just to be really sure, I put some Post-it tape over the sentiment so that if the stamp wasn't perfectly clean, I wouldn't ruin what I had already done. And here's my head again, as I positioned the stamp so that the birthday would be right under the tape that was covering the super. I wanted the spacing to look natural and similar to the words above the super, so I did take a minute to get that just right. I used the other edge of the tape as a mask and stamped the birthday. And when I peeled back the tape, my sentiment looked, well, super. Before I assembled the card, I placed the panel over the white card base, and then put down a mask of Post-it tape along the right edge so that I could blend yellow ink underneath the windows in the buildings. I used limoncello ink and another blender brush, which I noticed was pretty saturated. I found that when it gets harder to get a smooth blend, it's probably time to give the brush a clean. I bring them to my kitchen and run them under the tap with dish soap, rubbing them against my rubber glove until the water runs clear of any ink or soap. I squeeze out the bristles and then I wait for the next day before I use them again. Then it was time to start assembling the card. I added tape runner to the back of the piece together panel. I had used clear tape on the back to hold the pieces together, making sure that the tape wasn't behind the windows. Before I glued the sentiment on, I used a black Copic marker to color in the super. The outline letters give you the option of coloring them any color you like, or leaving them white, but I love that heavy look of the black letters, so that's what I went with. I popped the sentiment up with foam tape on the sky. I added a little Essentials by Ellen red colored light droplet to her crown using my jewel picker and Nuvo Deluxe adhesive, and then went over the super letters with Stardust Stickles for some subtle sparkle. The bold, vibrant colors on this card make it fun and perfect for a birthday, even though it's a night scene. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up below and subscribe to my channel for more inspiration. Product links are below in the description and also on my blog. Thanks so much for watching. See you next time.